The council chamber felt cold despite the warmth radiators working at full power. Ambassador Kel's hands shook as he held the datapad containing the final reports from his homeworld. The numbers told a story of destruction that his mind still refused to accept. Prima Verde was gone. 3 billion lives snuffed out in less than a week. His aide Myra stood beside him, her pale blue skin almost translucent with stress. The Valish had evolved on a peaceful world where the greatest predator was a small herbivore that ate tree bark. Violence was so foreign to their nature that they had no words for concepts like murder or war until they met other species. "The humans have agreed to see us," Myra whispered, her voice barely audible through the universal translator. "But their reputation ... Kel nodded grimly. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories about Earth, a death world where everything tried to kill everything else, where the dominant species had climbed to the top of the food chain not through size or natural weapons, but through cunning and an apparent inability to stay dead when they should. The chamber doors hissed open, and President Rodriguez entered, followed by her military advisor General Brooks. The human leader was smaller than Kel had expected, but there was something in her eyes that made him step back instinctively. Brooks was covered in scars that told stories of violence no Valish could imagine. "Ambassador Kel," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying authority that filled the room, "we've reviewed your preliminary reports. The Ravagers destroyed your homeworld in 6 days?" "Yes," Kel replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Our defense forces were designed for peacekeeping and scientific missions. We had no weapons capable of harming their ships, no soldiers trained for real combat." Brooks leaned forward, his scarred face showing interest. "How many ships did you lose?" "All of them," Myra answered when Kel couldn't speak. 12,000 vessels. The Ravagers didn't just destroy them, they consumed them, broke them apart, and used the materials to build more of their own ships." Rodriguez and Brooks exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding. These humans had seen real war before. "Our intelligence report suggests the Ravagers are not a single species," Rodriguez said. "They're a collection of conquered races forced to serve a dominant warrior caste called the Kethver. They've destroyed 47 civilizations in the past century." 48 now, Kel corrected bitterly. "We came to you because we heard stories, tales of human military capabilities that seemed impossible. Is it true that your species evolved on a world where 90% of life forms were actively trying to kill each other?" Brooks actually smiled at that question. "That's being generous. Earth didn't just have predators. We had diseases that could wipe out entire populations, weather systems that could level cities, earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages. Our planet tried to kill us in ways most species can't even imagine." "And yet you survived," Myra said, wonder in her voice. "We didn't just survive," Rodriguez replied. "We thrived. We turned every challenge into an opportunity to become stronger. Every disaster taught us new ways to adapt. Every predator we faced made us better hunters ourselves." Kel pulled up a holographic display showing the refugee fleet's current position. 2 million Valish survivors crowded into ships designed for half that number. Food and water running low, medical supplies almost gone. "We can offer you our entire technological database," he said desperately. 30,000 years of scientific advancement, faster than light communication systems. Medical techniques that can extend life for centuries. Energy sources that could power your entire planet. In exchange for what exactly? Brooks asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Protection," Kel whispered, "and revenge." The word hung in the air, like a physical presence. Revenge was not a concept the Valish understood emotionally, but they had learned its meaning through bitter experience. Rodriguez stood and walked to the chamber's main viewport, looking out at the stars. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something about humanity. When we make war, we don't fight to win battles. We fight to win everything. Completely and permanently." "I don't understand," Kel said. Brooks pulled up tactical displays showing human military formations. Ships that looked more like weapons than vehicles. soldiers in armor that could survive in environments that would kill most species instantly. The Ravagers destroyed your world and moved on, Brooks explained. That's their pattern. They consume what they need and leave. But if they attack something under human protection, they won't have that luxury. We'll hunt them across the galaxy if necessary. Your species has a saying, Rodriguez continued. Something about teaching a person to fish so they can feed themselves forever. Humans have a different philosophy. We believe in removing the predator entirely so no one has to worry about being eaten. Kel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. Are you saying you would commit genocide? I'm saying we would end the threat, Rodriguez replied firmly. The Ravagers have proven they can't coexist peacefully with other species. They've chosen to be predators, we'll treat them accordingly. Myra stepped forward, her diplomatic training overriding her fear. What would you require from us in return for this protection? Complete transparency about Ravager capabilities and tactics, Brooks said immediately. Access to your survivors who witnessed the attacks. Technical specifications for any Ravager technology you observed. And a formal alliance treaty, Rodriguez added. If we're going to war with the Ravagers, we need to know the Valish Republic will stand with us afterward. Not as subjects, but as partners. Kel looked at Myra, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her expression. They had come seeking protection and found something far more dangerous. These humans weren't offering to hide the Valish survivors. They were offering to destroy the enemy entirely. How soon can you mobilize? Kel asked quietly. Rodriguez smiled. And for the first time since arriving, Kel felt something like hope. General Brooks, what's the status of our expeditionary forces? Third Fleet is finishing exercises near Jupiter, Brooks replied without hesitation. They could be ready for deployment in 72 hours. Then we have a deal, Rodriguez said, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Welcome to the Protection of Earth Ambassador. Your people are safe now. As Kel shook the president's hand, he wondered if they had just made a deal with saviors or devils. Perhaps, he thought, there was no difference when survival was at stake. The supply depot at Luna Station buzzed with activity that would have seemed chaotic to most species, but followed a precise human logic of controlled aggression. Massive cargo haulers docked and undocked in patterns that pushed the limits of traffic control, while teams of workers loaded equipment that defied explanation to any civilized mind. Commander Torres watched the loading process from the observation deck, her scarred hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that could have dissolved. Metal. The liquid was another Earth export that most aliens found poisonous, but humans treated as a basic necessity. Like so many things about her species, it was simultaneously life-giving and potentially lethal. Ma'am, the Valish observers are requesting another meeting, her aide Lieutenant Park reported. They seem concerned about our weapon selections. Torres nodded without surprise. The Valish delegation had been growing increasingly nervous as they watched human preparations. Their own military equipment consisted mainly of non-lethal restraint devices and defensive shields. The humans were loading weapons designed to crack planets. In the main cargo bay, Sergeant Adams supervised the loading of atmospheric processors that could terraform a dead world in months or poison a living one in hours. Nearby, radiation suits hung in neat rows, each one rated for exposure levels that would kill most galactic species in seconds. The aliens don't understand, Adams muttered to his team. They think we're overpacking. Private Wilson laughed as he secured a crate of medical supplies. Wait until they see our combat rations. Food that tastes like cardboard but keeps you fighting for weeks. The conversation stopped as Dr. Patel approached with her Valish counterpart. Science advisor Nell, the human xenobiologist, carried herself with the casual confidence of someone who had spent her career studying species that could kill her, while the alien scientist moved like prey in an environment full of predators. Dr. Patel, Nell said through her translator, I must ask again about your medical protocols. These trauma surgical kits you're bringing, they seem designed for injuries that should be instantly fatal, Patel smiled grimly. That's the point. Human combat medicine isn't about preventing injury. It's about keeping our people functional despite injuries that would stop anyone else. We've had soldiers continue fighting with wounds that would put other species in terminal shock. But surely your people feel pain like any sentient being. Nell protested. Of course we do, Patel replied. We just learned not to let it stop us. Earth taught us that pain is information, not a command to quit. Torres decided it was time to address the aliens' concerns directly. She led the group to the Tactical Planning Center where holographic displays showed the human fleet formation. 50 ships arranged in patterns that looked aggressive even to human eyes. Ambassador Kell, Torres said as the Valish leader joined. Your people seem worried about our approach. Kell's translucent skin showed stress patterns that made his anxiety obvious. Commander, we asked for protection, not ... Your fleet appears designed for conquest rather than defense. Every human fleet is designed for conquest, Torres replied matter-of-factly. That's how we survived. On Earth, the best defense was always an overwhelming offense. We learned to hit first, hit hard, and keep hitting until nothing could threaten us again. She gestured to the tactical displays showing ship specifications. Each vessel carried enough firepower to sterilize a continent, yet they were considered standard escort ships by human standards. Your Ravagers destroyed your homeworld because they knew you couldn't fight back, Torres continued. They've never faced an enemy that hits back harder than they do. That's about to change. General Brooks' image appeared on the main screen as he joined the conversation from Earth. His presence filled the room even as a hologram, radiating the kind of authority that came from surviving countless battles. Commander Torres, status. Report, Brooks demanded. Loading proceeds on schedule, sir. We'll be ready for departure in 18 hours. Good. Ambassador Kell, I want you to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't believe in proportional response. If someone attacks our allies, we respond with overwhelming force designed to ensure they never attack anyone. Again, Kell's aide Myra stepped forward nervously. General, surely there must be rules of war even among your people. Some limits to violence. Brooks' expression didn't change. The only rule of war that matters is winning completely. Everything else is just philosophy. Torres pulled up intelligence reports on Ravager tactics. The images showed worlds stripped bare, populations enslaved or consumed, entire systems left as dead zones where nothing could survive. This is what the Ravagers do to civilizations that can't defend themselves, she said. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They consume everything and move on. The only language they understand is superior violence. But you're talking about genocide, Nell whispered, horror in her voice. We're talking about survival, Torres corrected firmly. The Ravagers made their choice when they decided to be predators. We're simply showing them what happens when prey evolves into apex predators. Dr. Patel activated another display showing human evolutionary history. Images of ancient humans hunting megafauna, surviving ice ages, building civilizations despite constant threats from nature and each other. Ambassador, your species evolved on a garden world where cooperation was always the optimal strategy. She explained. Humans evolved on a death world where violence was often the only option. We learned to be very, very good at it. Our ancestors faced predators that were bigger, stronger, and had natural weapons we couldn't match, Torres added. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. The Ravagers are about to learn why that combination is so dangerous. Kell looked at the loading operations continuing below them. Human soldiers moved with purpose and efficiency that spoke of extensive combat experience. Their equipment looked alien even to him, designed for environments and situations his people couldn't imagine. How many worlds has your species conquered? He asked quietly. None, Torres replied, surprising him. We've never needed to conquer anyone. But we've liberated quite a few from those who thought they were unconquerable. Brooks leaned forward. On the screen. Ambassador, you came to us because you heard we were effective warriors. That reputation exists because we don't fight wars, we end them. Permanently. The choice is yours, Torres continued. You can stay here in safety while we handle the Ravagers. Or you can come with us and see how humans solve problems that other species consider unsolvable. Myra looked at her superior, then at the humans around them. If we come with you, what would you need from us? Intelligence, Torres replied immediately. Everything your survivors remember about Ravager tactics, technology, and psychology. Help us understand how they think so we can predict how they'll react when they realize they're being hunted. And afterward, Cal asked, when the Ravagers are gone, what happens to our alliance? General Brooks smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Afterward, Ambassador, you'll be under the protection of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. No one will ever threaten your people again because they'll know that attacking Velish citizens means war with Earth. And in return? In return, Torres said, you help us build a galaxy where civilized species don't have to fear predators anymore. A galaxy where cooperation is possible because the bullies have been removed. As the meeting ended and the aliens departed to consider their options, Torres returned to watching the loading operations. Her aide approached with the final manifest. Ma'am, everything's secured. We're carrying enough firepower to crack a moon and enough supplies to sustain operations for 6 months without resupply. Torres nodded approvingly. Good, because once we start hunting Ravagers, we won't stop until they're extinct or reformed. Either outcome works for me. The void between stars held no sound, but the Ravager fleet moved through space with predatory grace that spoke of countless successful hunts. Warlord Grimskull stood in the command center of his flagship, studying sensor readings that showed the approaching human vessels with growing amusement. His species, the Kethver, had evolved in the eternal darkness of a world without sunlight. They were perfect hunters, with natural armor that could deflect energy weapons and claws that could tear through starship hulls. In 3 centuries of conquest, they had never met prey that fought back effectively. The small fleet approaches. From the inner system, his tactical advisor Vex reported. 50 vessels, primitive design, minimal shielding. Grimskull's jaw split in what passed for a smile among his kind. Another weak species seeking to protect the fleeing Valish. How many ships shall we lose to such pitiful resistance? None, Warlord, Vex replied confidently. Their weapons appear to be chemical-based projectiles and crude energy beams. Our bio-armor should absorb their attacks easily. 3 light-years away, Commander Torres studied the same sensor readings with very different thoughts. The Ravager fleet was massive, each ship a living weapon grown rather than built. Their biotechnology was impressive, but it followed patterns that human military analysts had studied extensively. First contact in 20 minutes, Lieutenant Park reported. From the communications station. The Velish advisors are requesting permission to attempt diplomatic contact. Denied, Torres replied flatly. We've seen what these predators do to diplomats. Signal the fleet. All ships to combat readiness. Dr. Patel watched from the science station as human warships spread into attack formation. Each vessel moved with purpose that spoke of extensive combat experience, their crews having trained for scenarios most species couldn't imagine. Commander, she said quietly, the Ravager bioships show interesting adaptation patterns. They've incorporated technology from dozens of conquered species. They learn from each victory. Then it's time they learned from a defeat, Torres replied. Open a channel to the Ravager fleet. The main screen flickered to life, showing Warlord Grimskull in all his terrifying glory. 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor that gleamed like black metal, with eyes that glowed red in the darkness of his ship's bridge. Behind him, his crew of various conquered species worked in terrified silence. Small humans, Grimskull said, his voice carrying the confidence of absolute superiority. You have 5 minutes to surrender your ships and join our fleet as slaves. Refuse and we will consume your vessels and add your technology to our own. Torres stepped into view of the camera, her human form looking tiny compared to the alien warlord. She wore standard combat armor that appeared primitive next to the Ravager's natural weapons, but her eyes held something that made even Grimskull pause. Unknown vessels, she said in a calm voice that carried across the void. You have attacked our allies and committed genocide against peaceful civilizations. You have exactly 30 seconds to reverse course and never return to this sector. This is your only warning. Grimskull's laughter was a sound like grinding metal. Warning? Little plaything, do you understand what you face? We have conquered 47 civilizations. We are apex predators from a world of eternal darkness. Your pathetic weapons cannot harm us. Funny thing about apex predators, Torres replied, her voice still eerily calm. They only stay at the top until something more dangerous comes along. Time's up. The human fleet opened fire simultaneously, and space erupted in controlled violence. That defied Ravager understanding. These weren't the simple energy beams or missile attacks they expected. Human weapons turned physics itself into a weapon, kinetic. Bombardment systems fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, turning simple metal slugs into planet crackers. Plasma cannons that used stellar fusion techniques created miniature suns that burned through bioarmor like paper. Gravitational torpedoes warped space-time itself, crushing ships from the inside out. Impossible, Vex whispered as 3 Ravager vessels simply ceased to exist in the first volley. Their technology readings were primitive. Humans don't build impressive-looking weapons, Dr. Patel had explained to the Valish observers before. The battle, we build weapons that work. Everything else is just decoration? Grimskull roared orders as his fleet tried to respond, but human tactics were unlike anything in Ravager experience. The enemy ships didn't fight in formation like civilized species. They moved like a pack of predators, coordinating attacks while maintaining enough independence to adapt instantly to changing conditions. Lieutenant Hayes piloted her fighter through the Ravager formation, her small craft weaving between massive bioships with precision that seemed impossible. Her weapons were tiny compared to the capital ships, but she targeted specific weak points that human intelligence had identified through careful analysis. Target their neural clusters, Torres commanded over the tactical network. These bioships are essentially giant organisms. Disrupt their nervous systems and they become floating debris. The battle turned into a masterclass in applied violence. Humans used every trick learned from centuries of warfare on a death world. They turned debris fields into weapons, used enemy ships as shields, and when conventional attacks failed, they resorted to tactics that would have horrified civilized species. Sergeant Miller's boarding party cut through a Ravager ship's hull, using portable fusion cutters that could melt through any known material. Once inside, they moved with the efficiency of persistence hunters, tracking down the ship's vital systems while fighting off defenders in conditions that would kill most species. These humans, one of the enslaved species aboard the Ravager ship whispered to another, they fight like they're already dead. Worse, the other replied. Watching human soldiers continue fighting despite injuries that should have been instantly disabling. They fight like death is just another inconvenience. Warlord Grimskull found himself facing a tactical situation no Ravager had ever encountered. The enemy refused to retreat despite taking casualties. They adapted their strategies faster than his forces could counter them. And worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Warlord, Vex reported desperately, we've lost 12 ships and the humans haven't even deployed their full fleet. Yet, these rearguard vessels appear to be scouts. Impossible, Grimskull snarled. What manner of species builds scout ships with planet-killing weapons? The answer came from Commander Torres herself as her ship closed to point-blank range with the Ravager flagship. The kind that evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. You wanted to hunt prey, Warlord. Congratulations, you found predators instead. The human assault continued with mechanical precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. Every attack was calculated for maximum psychological impact as well as physical damage. The humans weren't just trying to win the battle. They were sending a message to every Ravager in the galaxy. As the last surviving Ravager ships limped away from the battlefield, Grimskull transmitted one final message. His voice carried none of its earlier confidence, only the bewilderment of a predator that had discovered it was actually prey. "What manner of demons are you?" Tora's reply was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every Ravager fleet would receive it. "We're from Earth, Warlord. And you just declared war on the wrong species. Run back to your masters and tell them, humanity is coming, and we don't believe in showing mercy to genocidal predators." The human fleet regrouped efficiently, already. Preparing for the next phase of their campaign, Dr. Patel analyzed the wreckage of destroyed Ravager ships, learning everything possible about their technology and tactics. "Commander," she reported, "these bioships are impressive, but they follow predictable patterns. Once we understand their growth cycles and neural architectures, they become much easier targets." Torres nodded approvingly. "Good, Signal Fleet." "Command, tell them we've made contact with the enemy and confirmed our tactical advantages. The Ravagers are dangerous, but they're not adapted for fighting an enemy that hits back harder than they do." As the human fleet prepared to pursue the retreating Ravagers, Ambassador Kell watched from the observation deck of one of the escort vessels. The battle had lasted 4 hours, but it felt like witnessing the fundamental nature of the universe change. "Are all human battles like this?" he asked Dr. Patel quietly. The xenobiologist considered the question seriously. "No, Ambassador. This was actually quite restrained by our standards. The Ravagers got off easy because they retreated before we had to get creative. The hyperspace storm that surrounded Nexus Station would have been considered impassable by any sane species. Electromagnetic radiation levels that could fry unshielded electronics, gravitational anomalies that could tear apart improperly designed ships, and energy discharges that occurred without warning across multiple dimensions." Commander Torres stood in the navigation center of her flagship, watching sensor readings that showed conditions hostile to life itself. Her crew worked with calm efficiency around her, making preparations that would have seemed like suicide to most galactic civilizations. "Storm intensity is holding at Category 7, Lieutenant Park reported. "Navigation computers are giving, say, 12% chance of successful passage using conventional methods." "Good thing we're not using conventional methods," Torres replied. "Signal the fleet. Execute Stormwalker Protocol." Dr. Patel looked up from her analysis station where she had been studying Ravager biological patterns captured from previous battles. "Commander, are you certain about this approach? The storm has been protecting their stronghold for centuries. No species has ever successfully penetrated it. No other species evolved on a world where the weather actively tried to kill them." "Every day," Torres answered. "Humans have been navigating deadly storms since we first learned to build boats. This is just a larger ocean." The human fleet began moving into the storm using techniques that defied standard space navigation doctrine. Instead of fighting the chaotic energy patterns, they rode them like surfers on a wave. Ships that should have been torn apart by gravitational shears instead used those same forces to accelerate beyond their normal limits. Sergeant Adams led his engineering team through modifications that would have terrified safety inspectors on any civilized world. They were essentially turning their ship's hull into a giant lightning rod, channeling dangerous energies through systems designed to absorb and redirect power rather than simply resist it. "The aliens think we're insane," Private Wilson observed, as he welded additional conductors to the ship's outer plating. "They don't understand that insanity and innovation look identical until you see the results." Meanwhile, Ambassador Kell watched the human preparations with growing amazement from his quarters aboard one of the escort vessels. The Valish had tried to penetrate similar storm systems in their own space using conventional technology and careful calculation. They had always failed. The humans were succeeding through controlled recklessness that somehow produced precise results. They treated the deadly storm like a challenging but manageable obstacle rather than an insurmountable barrier. "Myra," he called to his aide, "contact Dr. Patel. I need to understand how they're doing this." Dr. Patel arrived within minutes, carrying datapads filled with information that made Kell's head spin. "Environmental adaptation studies? Chaos theory?" mathematics and engineering principles that seemed to violate basic safety protocols. "Ambassador," she said with enthusiasm that seemed inappropriate given their circumstances, "your people approach problems by trying to minimize risk. Humans approach problems by learning to thrive in dangerous conditions. The difference in outcomes is remarkable, but surely there are limits," Kel protested. "Physics doesn't care about evolutionary background." "Physics is exactly why this works," Patel replied, pulling up holographic displays showing energy flow patterns. "These storms follow mathematical principles. They're chaotic, but chaos has patterns if you know how to read them. Humans learned pattern recognition in environments where missing the signs meant death." The conversation was interrupted by proximity. Alarms as the first human ships emerged from the storm into the clear space around Nexus Station. The Ravager stronghold was massive, a converted asteroid that had been growing for centuries as conquered species, added their own technologies to its structure, defensive systems that had never been tested against serious attacks suddenly activated, filling space with energy discharges that could vaporize conventional spacecraft. The humans responded with tactics that turned the station's own defenses into weapons against itself. "Interesting," Torres observed as she studied the defensive patterns. "They've never faced an enemy capable of reaching them through the storm. Their weapons are designed to intimidate rather than actually fight." She opened a communication channel to the station, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every Ravager clan aboard. The message was simple and devastating in its implications. "Nexus Station, this is Commander Torres of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Your fleet has been defeated and scattered. Your reputation for invincibility has been shattered. You now have one chance to avoid complete destruction. Surrender unconditionally, accept exile to the Outer Rim, and never again attack civilian populations." The response came from Warlord Grimskull himself, though his voice lacked the confidence it had carried in their first encounter. "Humans, you have proven yourselves dangerous prey, but you cannot take our stronghold. We have defenses you cannot imagine." "Warlord," Torres replied with patience that sounded almost parental, "we've been studying your defenses for weeks. They're impressive against conventional attacks. Unfortunately for you, humans don't specialize in conventional attacks." What followed was a demonstration of applied human ingenuity that redefined the Ravagers' understanding of warfare. Instead of attacking the station directly, the humans infiltrated it using techniques that exploited fundamental flaws in biotechnology. Dr. Patel's team had developed viruses specifically tailored to Ravager biosystems. Not biological viruses, but information viruses that confused the living computers controlling the station's functions. The stronghold's own growth mechanisms began working against it, creating structural weaknesses that human engineers exploited with surgical precision. Lieutenant Hayes led infiltration teams through maintenance tunnels that the station's designers had never considered vulnerable. Humans were smaller than most Ravager species, more flexible and capable of surviving in environments that would kill other infiltrators. "The beauty of biotechnology," Hayes reported as her team moved through the station's nervous system, "is that it's predictable once you understand the underlying biology. These conduits follow the same patterns as any living organism's circulatory system." The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical damage. Ravager clans that had spent centuries confident in their invulnerability suddenly found their ultimate refuge penetrated by prey species they had considered inferior. Grimskull found himself facing a tactical situation that violated everything he understood about warfare. The humans weren't trying to destroy the station. They were taking control of it, turning its own systems against its inhabitants with precision that spoke of extensive planning and superior intelligence. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his remaining advisors. "They're using our own technology against us more effectively than we can use it ourselves." The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the enslaved engineers, a member of a species the Ravagers had conquered decades earlier, spoke up with newfound courage. "Because they studied it, Warlord. While you relied on brute force and intimidation, they learned. They understood your technology better than you do because they approached it as a problem to be solved rather than a tool to be wielded. The final assault came not as an explosion of violence, but as a systematic shutdown of everything that made Nexus Station function. Life support systems that had operated for centuries suddenly began filtering out specific atmospheric components that Ravager biology required. Gravity generators started producing fields that made movement difficult for large predatory species while remaining comfortable for smaller, more adaptable forms. The humans weren't destroying their enemies. They were making it impossible for them to function as threats while demonstrating complete control over their environment. This is what happens, Torres broadcast to every Ravager clan as their stronghold became uninhabitable. When predators encounter prey that evolved into superior predators, you can surrender now and accept exile, or you can continue resisting and discover what humans do to enemies who refuse to be reasonable. The choice was no longer about pride or dominance. It had become about survival, and even apex predators understood that concept. Warlord Grimskull stood in his command center, watching readouts that showed his stronghold systematically being turned against him. His species had ruled through fear and violence for centuries, but they had never learned to adapt or innovate under pressure. "Signal all clans," he ordered with the bitter taste of defeat in his voice. "We will hear the humans' terms." As human forces secured Nexus Station with efficiency that spoke of extensive experience in such operations, Ambassador Kell watched from the observation deck with something approaching awe. "Dr. Patel," he said quietly, "your species didn't just defeat the Ravagers, you made them obsolete." The xenobiologist nodded thoughtfully. "That's what happens when a death world produces a species that refuses to accept that any problem is unsolvable. We don't just survive challenges, Ambassador. We turn them into advantages." The depths of Nexus Station echoed with sounds no Ravager stronghold had ever heard before. Instead of the roars of predators asserting dominance, there was the quiet efficiency of human engineers making repairs and the measured discussions of diplomatic negotiations. Commander Torres walked through corridors that had been designed to intimidate visitors, past walls decorated with trophies from 47 conquered civilizations. The humans had left these monuments to genocide intact, but their meaning had changed. They were no longer symbols of Ravager strength, but evidence for war crimes. Tribunals. In the station's former command center, Warlord Grimskull waited with the resignation of a predator that had finally encountered superior hunters. His natural armor was scarred from battles across the galaxy, but his eyes held something new for his species, uncertainty about the future. "Commander Torres," he said as she entered, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "You have proven your species' strength. State your terms." Torres took her time responding, studying the alien warlord with the analytical gaze of someone who had spent her career understanding how to defeat enemies completely. Around the chamber, representatives from various Ravager clans watched nervously, their confidence in their own invincibility permanently shattered. "The terms are simple, Warlord," she finally said. "Complete cessation of attacks on civilian populations. Immediate release of all enslaved species. Relocation of all Ravager clans to designated sectors in the Outer Rim where you can hunt each other to your heart's content without threatening civilized species." "And if we refuse?" asked Clan Leader Vox, her scarred hide showing the ritualistic markings of countless victories. Torres smiled with an expression that made even hardened predators step back involuntarily. "Then we demonstrate why Earth is considered a death world and why humans are the apex predators that evolved there. The choice is yours, but understand that we've already proven we can find you anywhere in the galaxy." Dr. Patel entered the chamber carrying datapads filled with analysis that had taken weeks to compile. Her presence shifted the dynamic of the room as she represented something the Ravagers had never encountered: prey that had become more dangerous than predators through intelligence and adaptation. "Warlord Grimskull," she said formally, "our xenobiological studies indicate that your species evolved as persistence hunters on a world with limited resources. Your aggressive expansion isn't just cultural, it's biological imperative driven by evolutionary programming. Grimskull's eyes narrowed with interest despite his circumstances. You understand our nature better than most of our own kind. Understanding is how humans solve problems, Patel replied. Which is why our offer includes relocation to hunting grounds that will satisfy your biological needs without requiring you to prey on civilized species. We're not trying to change your nature. We're offering you a way to express it that doesn't conflict with galactic peace. The proposal that followed was uniquely human in its practical brutality. The Ravagers would be relocated to a cluster of worlds populated entirely by aggressive species that had evolved similar predatory instincts. They could hunt, conquer, and fight to their satisfaction while civilized species developed in peace elsewhere. You're creating a reservation for predators, observed Ambassador Kell, who had been listening from the diplomatic observation area. Creating a solution that works for everyone, Torres corrected. The Ravagers get to remain predators without threatening peaceful species. The galaxy gets protection from genocidal expansion. And humanity gets allies who understand that cooperation produces better results than conquest. Warlord Grimskull studied the territorial maps showing the proposed relocation zones. The worlds were harsh, dangerous, and populated by species that would provide worthy challenges for Ravager clans. It was exile, but exile to a paradise designed for their particular form of violent lifestyle. What guarantee do we have that you won't simply exterminate us once we've relocated? He asked. Torres' response demonstrated the fundamental difference between human and Ravager thinking. Because extermination would be wasteful. Reformed predators make excellent peacekeepers when properly motivated. Your clans will have opportunities to earn back territorial rights by protecting civilized species from other threats. You would trust us to guard your allies? Vox asked incredulously. Trust is earned, Torres replied. But we believe in redemption. Through proper incentives, help us maintain galactic peace, and you'll find humans to be remarkably generous with second chances. The negotiations continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Ravagers had learned that their choice was between extinction and extinction, and even apex predators understood survival mathematics. Dr. Patel worked with Ravager biologists to establish monitoring systems that would ensure compliance with the relocation terms. The process revealed something interesting about both species. When freed from the need to conquer or be conquered, former enemies could become surprisingly effective collaborators. It's remarkable, she observed to Torres during a break in negotiations. Remove the existential threat and these predators become quite intelligent problem solvers. Their hunting instincts translate well to tracking down actual criminals and hostile species. That's the point, Torres replied. Humans learned long ago that the best way to deal with dangerous enemies is to turn them into useful allies. Everyone gets what they need, and the galaxy becomes safer for everyone. As the formal surrender documents were signed, representatives from dozens of species that had suffered under Ravager attacks watched via holographic transmission. The ceremony marked not just the end of a particular threat, but the establishment of a new paradigm for galactic security. General Brooks appeared on the main screen to deliver the final address, his scarred face showing satisfaction at a job completed successfully. To all species watching these proceedings, he announced, let this serve as notice that the protection of Earth extends to all civilized species willing to accept it. We don't seek to rule the galaxy, but we will ensure that predators cannot prey upon the peaceful. And to any future threats, he continued, looking directly at the camera, understand that humanity learned civilization through surviving a death world. We know the difference between necessary violence and cruelty, between justice and revenge. But we also know how to end threats permanently when that becomes necessary. Ambassador Kell found himself standing beside Commander Torres as the ceremony concluded, watching Ravager clans prepare for relocation to their new territories under human supervision. Commander, he said quietly, when my people first came to Earth seeking protection, we feared we might be making a deal with devils. And now? Torres asked. Now, I understand that sometimes you need devils to fight monsters, Kell replied. But I also understand that humans choose to be protectors rather than predators. That choice makes all the difference. 6 months later, the village settlement on New Prima Verde thrived under the protection of a small human garrison. The soldiers trained daily in conditions that would have killed most species. Maintaining their readiness for threats that might never come, Dr. Patel had established a research facility where human and alien scientists worked together to develop technologies that could prevent future genocides. Her work on biological adaptation had led to breakthroughs that benefited species across the galaxy. Ambassador Kell often visited the human training facilities, still amazed by their casual acceptance of conditions that would be considered torture by most civilized species. He had learned to recognize the difference between cruelty and the discipline required to remain dangerous enough to deter predators. "Dr. Patel," he asked during one such visit, "do you ever wonder if there are limits to what humans can adapt to overcome?" The xenobiologist smiled as she watched human soldiers sparring in gravity fields that would crush most aliens. "Ambassador, we evolved on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. We're still here, and we're still getting stronger. I think the universe is going to run out of challenges before humans run out of adaptability." The story ended as it had begun, with a transmission across the galaxy. But this message wasn't a plea for help or a threat of violence. It was a simple statement of fact broadcast from Earth to every civilized species. The human species offers protection to all peaceful civilizations and swift justice to any who would prey upon the innocent. We learned long ago that the best way to ensure peace is to make war too costly for aggressors to consider. The galaxy is now protected by predators who choose to hunt monsters rather than innocent prey. And in the depths of space, where former Ravager clans now served as hunters of genuine threats to galactic peace, Warlord Grimskull reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. His species had sought to be apex predators and had discovered something more dangerous, prey that had evolved into protectors. The irony was not lost on him that the most dangerous species in the galaxy had chosen to use their power to ensure that others never had to become dangerous themselves. It was a concept his people were slowly learning to understand and perhaps even respect.